Hello, everyone, and welcome to CareersTalk. I'm Suran Sharma, an agile consultant based in Netherlands, and today we are going to discuss Scrum Master questions asked in Wells Fargo, Citigroup, and PNC Bank, shared by our USA WhatsApp group members. And to help us, we have invited Obinna from USA. He's having 17 plus years of total IT experience in various roles like Scrum Master, Agile Coach, and a project manager. And friends, believe me, these questions are little bit different, not like a typical scrum master interview question you might have seen on our channel. Okay, but before we start, make sure to subscribe for more such informative session. And if you find the content valuable, which I'm sure you will, don't forget to hit that like button. So without further delay, let's start the session. Welcome, Obina. Over to you, Obina.
Uh, Thank you, Sinan. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Great, great. So if you allow, shall we start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So listen then this question very carefully. Okay. So you are coaching a team that has been tasked with integrating a new AI driven feature into an existing legacy system. So, what kind of different strategies would you use to help your team to navigate this complexities of this particular integration? Obina.
Okay. So I'll say the first step is understanding the legacy system and understanding the AI system that is being brought for you to integrate. If you don't know anything about it, the first step will be seeking for a new resource who's going to be an SME, which is a subject matter expert. The next step would be something I call a requirement analysis. This is getting a total the total requirements for this new AI feature that the stakeholders want you to integrate into the legacy system. You need to ask for things like the use cases, the scenarios. This would help you understand the actual need for the AI. I also would ask that you carry out something called the impact analysis. The impact analysis is like a risk analysis, so you know how these AI future would affect or impact the actual legacy system and the project at hand. So risk, which includes the cost, the schedule, the risk, which includes the time, the time, which is what I stated earlier. With the help of the SME as well, you would want to talk about the architecture and the design. Okay, so which most people don't take into consideration, but before it's I see that as part of the plan. The SME would help you show where or what parts you can integrate, how it would work with your legacy system. Also, I would want to ask about the prototyping. So a prototyping, kind of like a proof of concept, giving an example of where this has been used. So all these steps are just I'd say the initial stages towards the planning steps or the design as well. It's kind of like the SDLC steps as well. And after you get the proof of concept, then we can go ahead to implementing. So the implementing part is putting this integrating this AI system into your legacy system, and after that we go into testing, quality assurance, documentation. Now, the quality assurance is just to make sure that everything is working as it should, as good as it's perfect. And now you document everything that you guys have done with the SME. Now, that brings me now to training, because you have to train the team that your own team. You can set up workshops whereby with what we have like a completed work or work workflow, they can learn from that and they can continue. Now, there's something called a post deployment review, which is done after deployment and monitoring. So that's just reviewing everything and just working and like a more of a continuous improvement on what you guys have done. So these are like the steps I'm going to take. Thank you, Sinan.
Wonderful. Yeah. Great for that elaborated answer. Thank you, Obina. Shall we move
You're
on?
welcome. Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is like you are facilitating, uh, you know, uh, the collaboration between the multiple agile teams, right? They are working in a large scale enterprise settings, the solution part. So how would you ensure that there's a effective alignment between all these different teams, right? There is always a challenge to work with the scrum of scrum and things like that. So how you are going to manage that, Obina?
Um, First and foremost, I'd say that if this, so I'll let me put it this way. It depends on the type of project. So if it's an enterprise-based project with several teams working on different projects, then I just have to come in and wear my agile coach hats, trying to synchronize the entire team. So the first step will be establishing a clear objective for the entire team. The second step will be structuring a communication channel. So you can have Teams chats where everyone, it's form of transparency where everyone can actually get any form of updates on whatever you want to, like whatever information you're trying to spread across. I also would ask for synchronization and alignment when it comes to using the artifacts, the ceremonies. So not one team having their daily stand up at one time and another team another time, and the sprints on a different day, and the other team strategies on a different day. So making them synchronize their team, making them align so that they can have everything at the same time if possible. There's something called dependency management, trying as much as possible to see how you can work with the dependency among the team. And communication, like I stated earlier, is going to help with that as well. Shared artifacts and documentation, for teams that use Confluence or SharePoint, I actually recommend having things like the definition of done for each of these teams to be similar. The definition of ready, whatever artifact documentation, SOP documents, escalation paths should be consistent among the teams. Now, I also ask that dashboards are being created by these teams and they're being shared across all platforms or across all teams so that each team member can see what KPIs and OPIs that the other team members are working with and can actually align themselves with it. Now, in a situation whereby the project is several teams working towards the same program, then the answer is just straightforward. I would recommend going with a scaled agile, which is safe. So these are like the two scenarios and the two strategies I'm going to hop onto.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's move on. So next one is it's a kind of situation. So let's say your team is experiencing a burnout due to a continuous high pressure sprints. They are working full of their capacity and maybe sometimes a little bit more. So how would you coach them to improve their work life balance while maintaining the productivity? So it's a little tricky one, but yeah, I'd like to see your answer. Yeah.
Okay. So my first step usually is to identify the signs of the burnout because most people don't know how to identify the signs. It might be someone who's very active, and later on, when you check your reports or your dashboard, you can see that the activities or are actually slowly declining. So the first step is communication, having an open dialogue with the person, creating a space for the person to feel to have trust to be able to open up. Now, another step would be realistic sprint planning. Now, amongst Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, one thing we do is try to see how we can beat our previous velocity. So we have an average velocity and we try to push the team to do more. So I usually kick against that. You have an average velocity, work with the average velocity because the more you push the team, the more burnout that you're going to be. So I also encourage them to take breaks. I encourage them to use the time off. And there's something I try to do, which is get rid of redundant meetings. Okay, there are meetings that are usually set up. Just sometimes you might just want to ask questions or follow up. You can send an email, you can send a chat, but try and reduce the amount of meetings you call this, especially meetings that they shouldn't be attending or ceremonies they shouldn't be attending. You can't be the only one there representing the team. That actually helps as well. I also ask them to encourage them to collaborate amongst themselves. Okay, so because I've seen situations whereby there has been a burnout due to the fact that a developer was struggling to get a solution to. He had a blocker with his code base, and he was struggling with it. Okay, but the moment I kind of paired him with a different developer, they resolved it real fast. So I encourage them to have that kind of collaboration among themselves, and it really helps. And finally, I make use of the retrospective. So, and not just having a retrospective set, but actually following up with the action items you got from the retrospective. So, as well as talking about the items that we got from the sprint, how they felt about the sprint matters, how the workload was, and everything that you need to know about that sprint. So based on that, you can have you can have those action items and actually go forward and doing what you've taken down from it. And if you can get management support to help, that would be like an excellent step to take as well. Thank you, Susan.
Wonderful, Obin. I think you sum up really well. You've covered all the major points. Cool. Okay, so let's move on. So next one is let's during your sprint review, all your stakeholders are present, but somehow they are not happy with the progress, and this suggests some major changes to the project scope. So how do you work with this kind of feedback? And and you have to make sure that the future sprints review go better. So yeah.
I'll start with stating that this is something that I've experienced before, and when I carried out the root cause, it was more on the transparency part of things. Okay, carrying the stakeholders along through the entire process is something that is very key. Okay, so the first step during the feedback or during the when you get the feedback from the sprint review is to get clarity on the feedback. Don't just take in notes. You ask questions, want to understand why, what. It's like carrying out the root cause analysis on that feedback. Now we know the next ceremony after the review is the retro. You're atomizing those feedbacks with your team, trying to figure out how best we can action on that feedback and how we can make sure that we improve if it's something that needs improvement from the team. I also want to carry out kind of an impact analysis because sometimes, like what you stated, the feedback has to do with a major scope change. I and the team carry out like an impact analysis to see how that scope change can affect the project and to see if it's something that we can actually do. Now, I also go back to the stakeholders with like a detailed report of their feedback and the solutions and future plans, and they see the pros and cons and see how we can move forward with from the feedback that they've given. I also to in order for you to avoid these happening or repeating itself again, I tend to ask that um, the transparency level is improved on. So things like your dashboard, your automated dashboard to be precise, your roadmaps, commenting on every single step that you're taking and carrying the team along, the stakeholders along with respect to prioritization and just not just prioritization and ranking. So they are like moving with you from start to finish. At the end of the day, during the review, they're not the review is not going to come to them as a shock. Whatever they see at the review will be something that they expect, and you're not going to have like that kind of feedback anymore. Thank you, Sudan.
Yeah, yeah, great. I agree. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So let's say you're working in a project and there are many unknowns. So how would you guide your team, especially let's say to use some relative estimation technique to ensure like more reliable sprint planning will have going to happen? So what's your take on that, Obina?
Okay, so having so much unknown when planning, I would say it's a red flag. Okay, but let's assume that you actually came into a sprint planning with so much unknown, meaning probably you didn't do so much work during your refinement section. The first step would be making the plan itself an actual refinement stroke plan. So having both of them there. So I would say whoever is putting on the hat of the business analyst has to present the user story, and definitely based on our work agreement, we already have our definition of ready itemized. Okay, so we present the story, we get clarification on the story, or we have initial estimation from the story. Now, you mentioned with the use of planning poker. For those who are not aware of planning poker, we kind of carry out a vote on using the Fibonacci sequence, a vote of the estimated story points that we want to assign to a user story when we have like a sense of clarity. We've gotten to the point whereby we've broken it down, we have all the definitions ready apart from the estimation, and when everyone votes, if we don't have a consensus, we ask everyone to give a reason why we're going with a particular estimation or a particular story point. And at the end of the day, if we get everyone to speak, then we can now cast the vote again. Now everyone has heard everyone's perspective. Usually, this ends up in a unanimous story point, and when we vote, whatever story point is being given, we go ahead and assign it. So with the unknown, these techniques could help get you to the known. All right. Thank you,
Yeah.
Sinead.
Okay. So next question is somewhat related to this only. So let's say during a project you identify a potential risk. Let's say third party API instability is there. So that is going to affect your upcoming project schedule. So how would you communicate these kind of risks to the stakeholder, to the client, and most importantly, how you are going to plan for these kind of contingencies?
Okay, there's several types of risk, but this risk kind of is specific to an API instability. So the first step is identifying the risk. But what I usually do, especially when it comes to API dependent projects, during the planning session, I ask questions. So I ask questions about, like you stated, instability, outages, which are usually the case when we have low environment patches. You have unstable APIs. So the first step is, like I stated, is identifying it, assessing the impact with respect to time. Okay, how long does this outage last, and how is it going to impact our deliverable? Then we propose a mitigation tactic on how we can work to fix this. So there's something called a caching mechanism whereby we know API pulls data in real time. Why caching is like a saved data space that it actually goes and pulls it from. So it's like just saving backup of backup. So when we have this instability or outage, it can work. So that's like a mitigation plan. And in some cases, we have a backup APIs that are being put in place. And finally, I always want to engage the stakeholders so that they're aware and so that we don't have a bad feedback like the previous questions that you asked. And as usual in every project, you just have to keep monitoring so that you can identify when these actually occur and you can put your mitigation plan in place. Thank you, Sinead.
Great. Okay. Obinna, thank you for that. Let's move on. So, uh, the next question is you are managing a project with a fixed deadline and you have very limited teams, the resources which are available. So, how would you prioritize the backlog and how do you ensure that your team is focused on delivering the most critical feature first? How are you going to do that along with the PO? So, that's the question, Obinna.
Okay. So there's two questions: how we prioritize and make sure the team follows in with the most critical. So that is prioritization and ranking. Okay, so for prioritization, I engage. If I put on the hat of the business analyst, I engage the stakeholders directly, and if not, it's usually the business analyst engaging the stakeholders with myself being present. But there's a strategy called Moscow: the must have, should have, could have, and want or wish. I use tools like Jira and labels, labeling these various requirements and features with what we must have, meaning that it has to go out by the release time, or what we could have, or things that we can do without, but they should be there. Okay, so having this various priorities set, very key. Now, how do we know which we have to work when it comes to ranking? That's another strategy I put in place called the WSJF, weighted workforce job first. So what that means is getting an average that's dividing the cost of delay by the actual duration it's going to take to put in the work. So that's done for all the PBIs, and the PBI with the highest rank is being seen as the critical one. So we get the prioritization done and we rank them so we know which to take into present sprints or present pull into the board. Thank you, Sinan.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so let's move on. So let's say your sprint planning meeting is happening, uh, and then two senior folks, two senior developers have some disagreement over the implementation approach for a complex user story that involve the microservices architecture, for example. So how would you going to mediate this kind of conflict to reach a kind of agreement? Yeah, Obinna.
Okay. So, first and foremost, I always want it to be tackled there and then. So whenever you get the conflict, you don't wait till retrospective, you don't wait till after, especially in this situation. So what I do is pause and acknowledge that actual conflict, okay? And before I go ahead and speak to either of the parties, I want to create a safe space, making the team understand that we're both working towards the same goal. It's not a competition. We're not working against each other. They understand that we have the same goal. Then now I ask both party to actually voice out their perspective. They're going to give their perspective and why they think this is how we should go. Now, after hearing both parties, I want to evaluate the options. So we want to see the pros and the cons. And if once we do it, we actually carry out a vote. So this includes everyone on the team. Let's see who believes this would work well. Because since we've already analyzed both perspective, everyone understands where each of them are coming from. And if we come into a consensus, we go ahead and go with that part. Now, after doing that, I also always ask that we document what we agreed upon so that we can have reference to that documentation if we had to be faced with this situation again and we don't have this conflict ever again. Thank you, Sinan.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, so the next question is, let's say you are coaching a newly formed Scrum team that has little experience with CI/CD, the continuous integration and the continuous deployment part. So, what steps or what strategies would you take to guide them in adopting the CI/CD practices?
Okay, so the first step would be you as a Scrum Master, you need to understand what the entirety of a CI/CD process or pipeline is. You need to understand why it's been put in place. One way would be you carrying out going for training, or you can bring in an SME as well to set up workshop and training. Now, after everyone is has been trained or taught what to know about it, the next step will be the initial setup. So the tools that are being used, including Jenkins, Docker, Cellular, JUnit, whatever, we have the initial setups. And while that is being done, there's also the workshops are actually going in parallel for those tools. Now, I usually recommend that the least critical item on the PBI can be used for implementation of this process, the CI/CD, to see if we can get from start to finish. So you don't want to use a big feature that, in case something goes wrong, it doesn't really affect the end user. So we test it. If it works well, we get our feedback, and after that, we go with continuous improvement, which includes the automation of the CI/CD. The automation scripts being improved, being updated on a regular basis, and that's it. Thank you, Sinan.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so the next question is there is a disagreement between your PO, between your Scrum team, your developer, your QA regarding the definition of done. So, how would you mediate this kind of alignment with respect to their understanding so that everyone will have some similar kind of understanding?
Okay. So if you find yourself in that situation, it just means that you didn't have like an actual work agreement set up on the definition of done, definition of ready, and all of those. So the first step is building that actual work agreement between the team. We all have to understand what we want to see when we can, for us to say that each of the PBIs have met the definition of done, and I have to make sure that the parties that are having these disagreements are part of that conversation so that they can actually both contribute their expertise in seeing to it that we come to a consensus. We also have to carry out like carry out pros and cons, like an analysis to get the pros and cons of their various perspectives on getting this definition of done established. And when we come to a consensus, I would want us to go ahead and document it using any of our documentation tools, and giving like a reference to every other team who is related, who has a relative interest to this project, and also involving the stakeholders so that everyone understands how we're going to be going ahead with this. Now, the final step will be enforcing the definition of done. I know with the project tracking tools like Jira, you can enforce it using the workflow management and making sure that some transitions don't go into don't are not put in place or can go to the from one status to the other without meeting some criteria. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, I think we are good for today's session, Obina. We have just finished all of our 10 questions for today. But friends, we have many more
Okay.
questions which are lined up for our second session. So, Obina,
Okay.
thank you for being with us today. And friends, we hope that you got some valuable information from this session. So please do comment and like the video, support us, and your feedback help us to make better content for you. And if you are new, subscribe, join our CareersTalk family. So see you in the next session. Until next time, take care, stay inspired, keep achieving the great things. This is Sunan Sharma signing off. Thank you, Bina, one more time.
Thank you very much.